Israeli protesters are once again taking to the streets to demand an end to the government's judicial overhaul effort, just as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggests all of the outrage is overblown. The first law, passed in a sweeping package of bills, weakens the Supreme Court's oversight of government decisions. Mr. Netanyahu says to call that an end to democracy is silly. In an interview with ABC News, he describes the law as a minor correction. I want to get more from our Fred Pleitgen, who is this evening here for us in Tel Aviv. And Fred, for many on the streets, I'm sure this is not a minor correction. Give us a sense of what you're seeing.
Well, first of all, I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. For a lot of the folks that you're seeing out here, it's definitely not a minor correction. In fact, one of the things that we're hearing again and again from the protesters who have come out here is they say they feel they need to keep bringing the pressure to the street, despite the fact that, of course, that the Israeli Supreme Court has said that it will hear the petitions against this first of the several laws that the government wants to put forward to overhaul the judiciary, simply because they want to make it known that they don't agree with it. You can look around me, we can pan around a little bit, you can see that there's thousands of people who have come out on the streets tonight. Apparently going to be a pretty big march. We've been speaking to folks who feel that sense of urgency. And to get back to the question, Issa, yes, they certainly say that for them, this is not just a minor correction. They say right now they feel they need to act because they think democracy is at stake. I spoke to some of the protesters. Here's what they had to say.
The government, the coalition's new laws breaks the constitutional framework of Israel and concentrates the power in a single entity. The next step will be that there will be no more fair elections. We have to stop them because they're ruining our democracy.
All what they claim is that nothing happened, you know? It's only a small step. No, it's a small step opening the door for a much larger move. And we want to stop it. We tried to stop it before. We were not successful. And we're trying to stop any other further activity.
So as you can see there, Issa, that's just two of the many voices that are out here, and they are very loud, as you can hear and see. And they vow to keep coming out. They say, look, even until the Supreme Court deals with this, they are not going to remain quiet. Of course, one of the things that we've seen over the past couple of months here in Israel is that these protests have traditionally happened on weekends, on Saturdays. Well, now is a Thursday, and the folks here are out there because they say, after that vote that happened in the Knesset on Monday, with that reasonableness act that was passed by the Knesset, they think that the urgency is even greater, and they are saying they feel that they need to bring the pressure on the street now and make sure that the Prime Minister hears it as well, Issa.
I'm sure he will hear it. They are loud and they are determined. Fred Pleitgen for us this evening in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Fred. Well, if you've been watching these protests that we've been showing you here throughout the week, you probably haven't seen many Palestinians, even though Palestinian citizens make up about 20% of Israel's population. Many are staying on the sidelines, believing that Israeli democracy doesn't fully apply to them. And while they can vote, the millions of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank have no say in Israeli politics, although their lives could be greatly affected, of course, by the weakening of judicial checks on the Israeli government's power. We're joined now by Kenneth Roth. He was the Executive Director of Human Rights Watch for nearly 3 decades. Ken, great to have you on the show. I'm not sure where you could have heard Fred Pleitgen there in Tel Aviv, but what we have been seeing, similar scenes for the past 6 months, many Israelis angry, fuming, saying the judicial overhaul undermines the country's democracy. What is your reaction, first of all, to this new law and the scenes we have been seeing playing out from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv?
Well, the protesters are completely right in the sense that, the Israeli government is a system with very few checks and balances. There's no constitution. There's no separation between the legislature and the parliament. There's no federal and state governments. The real governmental check on the majority in the Knesset is the Supreme Court. And Netanyahu's far-right government is trying to pare that back to allow it to do whatever it wants, in essence. So this does threaten Israeli democracy itself.
And yesterday on the show, roughly at this time, I was speaking to the former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert about exactly these judicial reforms. Have a listen, Ken, to what he had to say. Have a listen to this.
They can appoint to all the key positions in the administration, in the bureaucracy of the State of Israel, members of the Central Committee of Likud, and basically change the democratic nature of the State of Israel. And then using the powers that they have accumulated in order to change the policies, which they are already now declaring, in order to settle more in the territories, in order to continue the harassment of Palestinians living in the territories.
How could this law then, Ken, and the push for judicial overhaul impact Palestinians in the West Bank, many of whom, of course, have seen increased already nightly raids under this right-wing government?
Well, Netanyahu says essentially, I have a majority, I get to do whatever I want. It's anti-democratic for the court to stand in my way. But that's a very narrow conception of democracy, because democracy has the majority limited by rights and the rule of law. So if you get rid of the court, you have an unimpeded majority that doesn't have to worry about rights. And this is going to have dramatic effects for Palestinians in occupied territory. Now, it's not as if the Supreme Court was great for those Palestinians to begin with. It has allowed, all sorts of restrictions on their movement. It's allowed restrictions on their ability to even add a bedroom on their home. And it has steadfastly refused to address the legality of the settlements, which it can't address because they're blatantly illegal. They violate Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which basically says you're not allowed as an occupier to move your population into occupied territory. And most significantly, that the provision, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, defines that as a war crime. So the court has avoided all of this. But I think what Palestinians fear is that there are certain steps that the court has been willing to block. For example, they said so far that settlements cannot be built on private Palestinian land. They actually allowed certain settlements to be dismantled in Gaza. And what everybody worries about now is, without this court, if the court is weakened, would the Netanyahu far-right government go forward with plans to annex large parts of the West Bank? It's already seizing territory left and right. Would it formally annex that territory?
And on that point, I don't know if you heard Ben-Gvir said this week that this law was just the beginning, Ken. In the last 24 hours, I've got here a group of UN experts basically have released a statement warning that an effort to annex the West Bank may be underway. I'm going to read part of the statement. I'm going to bring it up for our viewers to see this. Israel's continuous annexation of portions of the occupied Palestinian territory, now focusing on large swathes of the West Bank after unlawfully annexing East Jerusalem, suggests that a concrete effort may be underway to annex the entire occupied Palestinian territory in violation of international law. That statement there from a group of UN experts. I mean, it goes on then to name, Ken, Bezalel Smotrich. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that certain members of Netanyahu's government have been very clear that that's exactly what they want to do. Now, that same group of UN experts has already said that what exists in Palestinian territory is apartheid. And that's something that Human Rights Watch, and frankly, every serious human rights group that has looked at the issue, agrees with. Western governments are reluctant to take that step. What they tend to say is, oh, well, yes, there might be systematic discrimination, there might be oppression, but don't worry about it, it's temporary. There's the peace process. We're going to move toward a two-state solution. But that answer is just no longer credible. We've had 50 years of occupation, 30 years of a so-called peace process. It's going nowhere. People who look at the sort of Swiss cheese that is left of Palestinian enclaves in between the settlements and the outposts and the bypass roads recognize that there's just no prospect anymore of a contiguous Palestinian state, that what you have instead is what people refer to as a one-state reality between the river and the sea, encompassing Israel and the occupied territory as just one state. And the reason governments don't want to recognize that is because then there really are two choices for the Israeli government. Do they give equal rights to everybody, or is it apartheid? And so far, their answer has been, it's apartheid.
And with that one-state reality, and given the fears that many have, that we have seen in the streets tonight of Israel with this judicial overhaul, given everything that you've just put into context for us then, Ken, I mean, what can the international community do? Do you think that Israel's partners, above all here, the US, has said enough, been strong enough for this? We had President Biden calling this overhaul unfortunate. Does President Biden need to go further, in your opinion?
I mean, absolutely. The U.S. sends $3.8 billion in military aid to the Israeli government every single year. So they basically are funding the apartheid. They should, at minimum, condition that aid on certain very concrete steps to end the apartheid, or really end the aid altogether. But Biden, won't even go so far as to recognize the one-state reality. He still, talks about the two-state solution as if that's the least bit credible. And every time I hear somebody refer to the peace process or the two-state solution, I know that they're avoiding reality. They're avoiding the real subject at hand, and they're finding any excuse they can not to admit the apartheid that exists today.
Ked Roth, really appreciate your analysis and expertise here. Thank you, Ked.